and take it away.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Danielle. So I'm in I'm located around Southern California in a town called Temecula, which Hannah knows well. But I have about 13 years of SEO experience. I've done a lot of B2B and B2C work. Probably the biggest e-commerce company that I've done work for is Office Depot. They had over 100,000 SKUs. And then I've done a lot of work across the board. So I've probably worked for at least 100 different companies at this point. So I've done work for LinkedIn, for Square, Capital One, Indiegogo, if you're familiar with the crowdsourcing software, bunches and bunches of startups, lots of different software as a service company. So I'm pretty well versed in SEO across all types of industries. I do have quite a bit of experience in e-commerce. My husband actually has his own business. So he has a meadery. If anybody's ever heard of that, it's called Batch Mead, but it's honey wine. So it's alcohol made from honey instead of grapes. And so I've done a lot of work promoting his site with SEO as well. We've been able to triple the traffic in the last year from organic. But a couple of the things I've done, I've worked for, as I said, lots of different companies, but I'm really good at creating content strategies and growing traffic pretty rapidly. Normally, SEO is one of those slow growing things. So if you're not familiar, SEO stands for search engine optimization, and it relates to Google. So, and there's millions and millions of people searching on Google every month. Every minute, there's, I think, 65,000 searches a second is the latest stat from Google. So tons of people, always from their phones, from their tablets, from their desktop, looking up different keywords. And so SEO is really all about how do we give users content that they're looking for. And we can do so, we call it free because you're not technically paying for a click, you're not paying for appearing, but it does take a little bit of work to get there. And we're going to go through some really quick ways to get that. So why should you care about SEO? I did mention there's lots of, so 63,000, not 65, sorry. But it does really also drive down the cost of all your other efforts. So if you're doing social media ads, or you're doing paid search ads, or you're doing a lot of posting in your different platforms, reading YouTube videos, all of those things can link back to your website efforts. And you can see when you're optimizing for SEO that usually you have to pay a little bit less for all those paid ads because users will interact with your content a little bit better. So Google will see your content is higher quality and you'll be able to capture more people. So overall, I get this feedback a lot that people think SEO is for the Google robot and how Google is crawling your site. And if you hack it the right way, Google will crawl you and rank you more frequently. But what Google's really looking at is how people are interacting with your page. So they're trying to understand what's the content on the page. How are people clicking through? Are they leaving? Are they going back to Google to look for something else because they didn't think the page was relevant? So they're really trying to figure out what the user wants. It really doesn't have much to do with robots in the back end. Otherwise, Google wouldn't be making as much money as they are. And there's lots of different factors, which can be really overwhelming. I know SEO can be very overwhelming if you think about all the different pieces that impact how Google's ranking your site, but you can really narrow it down to 3 things. They're really looking at your content. So what's on the web page, what's displaying, what are users looking at, how many links you have. So if you have a beautiful product landing page for a new shoe, but there's no links to it, you can't navigate to it from your homepage outside of search, that's going to be difficult for Google to understand that it's important. And then they're looking at clicks. So they're looking at how many people click to the page. They're looking at how many people click to something else from that page, like whether it's your checkout cart or something else. So it can be really impactful in terms of how Google ranks your content. So they see things like click-through as a really strong signal that the content is good. So we'll kind of walk through some more details around these, but if you kind of just think about these 3 factors as the most important ones, you can kind of forget about all the other nuances of code and things like that that can get a little bit overwhelming. So I'm sure most of you already have a website and it's already set up, but just some quick tips from an SEO standpoint, using Google Analytics, if you don't have that set up, it's free. It's usually pretty easy to set up if you're using a Shopify, a Squarespace, or a WordPress. Really any sort of e-commerce platform, BigCommerce, anything like that is going to allow you to integrate Google Analytics pretty seamlessly, pretty easily. There's a link in here to go to Google Analytics. It really will tell you like how much traffic are you getting from organic search, which is what Google Analytics calls SEO. How much traffic are you getting from your social platforms? How are they converting? How many people are buying products from the efforts that you're doing? And it can help you narrow down what's working and what's not. Google Search Console can be helpful. This is a more techie tool, but it does show you if Google's indexing your content, meaning are they listing your content when somebody does a search? So if they're not indexing your content, there could be something wrong, and this tool can help you debug that if there's some reason. So you should be able to go to Google, search your brand and possibly a product, and see your website listing in that result. And if you can't, there might be something wrong with Google being able to see your site. So in terms of what's important, so I can really narrow this down to a few different things, but the primary thing that you want to think about is being consistent. I see a lot of brands be very inconsistent. So not only with your brand name, you want to make sure that your brand is used on your homepage, but you're using it, like you have this product description down here, you're using it on your content so that Google understands your brand is the most important thing on your website. And when people search your brand, your website comes up first, not Twitter, not Instagram, or something else that links to your site. And then you want to think about your whatever you're targeting. So for this instance, this is a keyword around chunky loafers. This is a Versace branded product. And then you have Zappos's new sub-brand where they're trying to do more higher end clothing. But notice how they have chunky loafer in the URL, they have it in the title of the product, they have it in the first sentence of the description. Those things are really strong signals to Google. So you don't want to call it, chunky platform in one place and chunky loafer in another. That keyword consistency is so critical to organic search. There's lots of different keywords. We'll talk a little bit about how to do keyword research, but making sure that you're using the keyword in those places. There's also, if you're familiar with page title and meta description, so when you're doing a search on Google, that's what appears in the results. You'll see the bolded text as a title, and then the content underneath is a description. And adding that keyword to those is super helpful. And then creating categorization. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, I think, on the next slide, but creating categories is also really impactful for Google. They want to understand so if you have all of these products, how should they think about them in terms of topics? So if you have just a category named shoes and you actually have 10 of your 30 pairs of shoes are loafers, they want to see that categorization so they can understand that they should be ranking this site for loafers. So we'll talk a little bit more about that after this slide. So this is about navigation. So see how this is an example from Vici. But see how they've kind of bucketed all of these categorizations. Their navigation is a little heavy. I wouldn't recommend having every single link in the navigation, but the way that they've kind of bucketed mini dresses, midi dresses, it's because they know people are searching those things. Even these styles, they know that people are searching those topics. So you want to make sure that you're capturing people looking for those trendy new clothing items, and you're making sure that you're talking about the topics that people are searching for. So you can definitely go overboard and create too many categories that aren't necessarily useful. So we have a slide in a little bit that talks about how to do that keyword research. A footer can also be really helpful. So I see a lot of empty footers on smaller sites. Startups are like trying to be minimalist, and so they'll have like just their social media links. But it is important to have links in your footer, not only for the user, so that if they want to figure out like shipping and delivery or returns or how to track, that's all linked to. And a lot of times Google ads and Facebook ads will require you to have the return and exchange, the policy, the fulfillment policy, so that they can like check all their boxes on their side, but making sure that you're linking to some of your social media platforms is usually super helpful. And then also having a sign up for email, not necessarily as impactful for SEO, but just for capturing your leads and people who are interested in your product, getting their email is usually really helpful. And then you can also have, your top categories in your footer. So if you want to link, so this top one is from Free People and this bottom one is from Vici, and neither of them are leveraging their categorization, but you could have like 3 to 10 links of the top traffic categories. So like loafers, shoes, dresses in your footer. It just helps Google have another signal of understanding what's important to you.
Danielle, this is so good. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You have so much great content in here. We had a question from the chat. Is there any chance that the replay viewers and the girls in the chat will be able to access this deck afterwards? Are you willing to share a PDF?
Of course.
Yeah, that would be lovely. I think there'll be there's a lot of questions I already have in my head. So this is fabulous. Thank you. Continue, sorry.
No worries. Homepage. So when you're thinking about Google and what is most important to them, it's definitely your homepage. So homepage is where they start. It's what they crawl the most. And they want to understand the context, not only of all your content, but of you and who you are. So you want to make sure that, on your homepage you have, so this is Free People's example, but see how they have these kind of buttons at the top so they can kind of drop people right into engagement right away. And then they're utilizing their hero section to kind of get people into their new collection. So thinking about your homepage in terms of scrolls. So when you're on your phone or you're on your desktop, whatever appears when you first load the page, that's called above the fold. You want to make sure there's something for your customer to do outside of just interacting with your navigation. So promoting, things under $100 or other topics, categories in your site, that's going to be super helpful to driving people right away into shopping. And then when you're building your homepage, you don't want to put everything in the kitchen sink on the homepage. I see that happen a lot. I've worked on homepages where you have like 30 scrolls before you get to the bottom. So you kind of want to limit things to 2 to 5, which might sound hard, but you want to think about stacking. What's most important? Where do I want people to go first? And not necessarily what you want to sell, but what are people most interested in, so that you can kind of stack rank that most important content up top and then everything else underneath, because you'll always have your navigation, you'll always have your footer, so you can leverage those for kind of links deeper into content, but your homepage should really help drive people very quickly into shopping. And then this is probably the most critical part that'll be the most impactful. So trying to understand what the audience is searching. So I included a link to a free tool in here that lets you put in a bunch of keywords, and it'll tell you over here, it says average monthly search volume. So what that means is that Google is seeing that 140 people on average. So what they do is they take the last 12 months and they aggregate so they basically take the last 12 months, divide by 12 to decide how many people are searching this term on average per month. And so you'll see, 140 people. And then for chunky platform loafers, 30 people. Platform loafers has 1,300. So there's obviously more value in creating landing pages or content around platform loafers because there's just more awareness. So this can really help you understand when there is a new trend, what are people searching and how, like what keywords are they using exactly? So this is very dependent on what you put in. But if you are stuck and you're getting a lot of keywords just either with no volume or low volume, you can start putting those keywords into Google, just doing a search with chunky loafers, and you'll see content come up related to platform loafers. So that can kind of give you an idea of what to go back and stick into this tool to see what has more volume. It doesn't necessarily, there's not necessarily like a magic number, it has to be this amount, but you want to kind of look at what's most relevant to my content. Like obviously if I type shoes, that's going to have, 250,000 searches a month, but having a page that just says shoes is not very relevant to somebody that's searching for, heeled shoes or something like that. So making sure that the keyword you're picking is relevant to the content. So if all the products are platform loafers, perfect. If they're all green platform loafers, you could have a category page for that. But you kind of want to pick the keyword that has the most search volume for the category that you're looking for. Usually that means over 1,000 searches a month, but if it's a trendy term or something that's more niche, maybe 500 is okay. 30 probably not worth your time to build a page for. But this tool can really help you with a lot of things. So you could put in things like questions if you want to try to figure out ways to write articles. So I have a couple slides about articles and content, like writing content in a bit, but something to think about. So once you kind of decide what your keyword is, back to that consistency rule, you want to make sure that it's in your title, it's in your product name, or it's in the name of the page, it's in the description, you have it a couple times in the copy. The interesting thing about e-commerce is that a lot of the brands that have gotten most of the organic visibility don't do a great job of keyword consistency. So you can, like Nordstrom is well known for all of their, like the way that they spin out all of their product pages, Amazon too, but they don't really do a great job of optimizing their category pages. So, or even their product landing pages. So this can really help you rank for something like platform loafers. It's not impossible to rank for those terms, even if you're a smaller site with less traffic. So this next section is all about on page. So I just like the Vici example, so I used it quite a bit, but something to think about. I know we talked about homepage already, but even when you're thinking about your category pages or even your product pages, back to that kind of what loads right when you land on the page, the above the fold, you want to make sure that there's something for the user to do outside of just the navigation. So having a button like shop now or having the add to cart above so a lot of times Squarespace and Shopify, you write a big description and it'll push your add to cart button down. So you want to make sure you're kind of looking at how it appears on mobile to make sure that add to cart. You would be surprised at the increase in sales that you'll see from having the button above versus trying to make somebody scroll to add something. So definitely worthwhile in checking. Usually you want to have something below. So like, let's say you have a product page and then somebody scrolls to the bottom, there should be like related products or something else that they could kind of engage with besides just that add to cart button. And then this top layer announcement bar usually gets a lot of traffic as well. So a lot of clicks. So if you think about either like putting a code here or some sort of promotion around a certain product, these are the hot button click areas. So you have this top area, you have your upper right hand nav, and then you have your kind of like middle section where usually you want a button. Like those are the areas that users click on the most. So you want to make sure that you have something there for them to engage with. And then this page, this standout styles, we'll call this the title of the page. From an SEO standpoint, standout, not great for keyword wise, but if we were calling this platform loafers, you would want that to be right here. You would want whatever the target keyword is to be your, what I like to call the H1, but it's really your page title. Usually Shopify, Squarespace, WordPress will all have that as like the title bar. And then you want that keyword to be within the copy on the page as well. So next slide is about product listing. So this one is probably the most technical of all the slides in my deck. But when you want to optimize a product listing, Google, so we talked a lot already about using the keyword in your product name, your title, your product description. A lot of websites have breadcrumb structures. So when you're creating that category for chunky loafers, you can make sure that the product lives under that category. And usually that will appear in a breadcrumb. Sometimes depending on your theme, you have to enable it, but it's not super critical. So if we were to stack rank, what's critical in terms of naming, it's really these three areas. So you have your description, your title, and your URL. You can also start naming all your product file names for the images with the target keyword, and that can give another signal, especially with image searches. So there's a lot of terms that are like chunky loafers is a good example. If you go put that into Google, you'll see a lot of image searches, and that can help you rank in the image search, which is also free. So there's usually your product listing ads at the top, then you usually have a couple text ads, then usually it's the image search, and then you start getting into the organic listings that look kind of like this Amazon one to the left. So the technical tricky part is called product schema. So schema is basically a word that means schematics. It's the organization. So Google's trying to understand better what products are. So see how Amazon has like this star rating, not very good rating, but they have a star rating, they have a number of reviews, they have a price, and they have an in-stock marker. So Google's leveraging something that we call product schema. So there's a link to Google's like write-up on product schema. A lot of the platforms have this built in out of the box. So like Squarespace, Shopify, WordPress, you can use, for Shopify and WordPress, you can use a plugin. Squarespace allows you to just kind of, as part of their like out of the box product listing page, you can add star ratings and reviews. So Google wants to see your product name, your description, an image, and then they want to see the star ratings and reviews. They want to know what brand it is. So like see how this page has Versace, that's the brand. And then they want to, you can add reviews outside of star ratings if you want. And then pricing is also critical. So basically everything that Amazon has right here, they want to see that on the page. And then that way you can start getting more visibility. So when listings have this markup added, which I know can sound very complicated, but I promise in most cases, it's just like a little box that you fill out for each product when you're building the product page. And then they'll pick this up more frequently because they'll see like this extra information and they'll think like, oh, this is more relevant, because users typically like when they see a star rating or pricing and they're more likely to click on something. So it can be complicated, but I promise it's not that scary. It's really just these three things. So it's like your star rating, what the brand name is, and then pricing. But we can move along. And then writing content, I know it's maybe not as exciting, but in a lot of cases, article content can rank better than product pages, than sometimes even your homepage. So I've worked on quite a few sites where they leverage their blog as kind of like a top level area to capture people, to drive them deeper into their site. So you might be talking about, you know, the top 10 trends for spring and summer, and then you're linking to all your products that you feel like are top for spring and summer, and that's how you get people to buy more content. So for example, this summer fashion trends, I think there's roughly 11 or 12,000 searches a month for this term, especially in the last few months. So this article was written, I think, by Vogue. And then what you're doing is you're just looking at, so let's say you want to rank for summer fashion trends, you put it in the search volume tool, then you go to Google, you type summer fashion trends, and you look at the first couple articles and you say, okay, all these articles are listing like three skirts, 5 shirts, and 2 pairs of shoes, or 2 pairs of earrings, or whatever you want. And then they're all talking about they're linking to the different fashion trends. They're talking about chunky loafers. They're talking about low-rise jeans. So you want to make sure that you're kind of mimicking the article that's ranking in the top position, not word for word, but kind of looking at what their content is and then kind of mimicking to make sure you're talking about similar things. So I have a little note for that here. You don't want to be looking at the ad. So make sure that you look for the organic listing, the one that doesn't have a little ad box next to it. But this can be really helpful at just driving more visibility from keyword and sales in some cases from keywords that you wouldn't think to write content around. It doesn't have to be super long. I know 700 to 1,000 sounds long, but once you've put your little blocks of content for products that you're linking to, and once you kind of listed out what all the trends are, you're pretty much almost all the way there. You're just writing in some extra context of, you know, why you want to be trendy during the summer. But Like for my husband's meadery website, for example, we have an article on Vikings drinking mead, and that is like his highest performing page. It drives 10% of his site traffic. So sometimes crazy things that you write can be really impactful and drive a lot of sales. It's just kind of depends on what people are interested in. And then this last part, I think I'm doing okay on time. This last part is about your brand. So there's a few different ways you can get your brand. So this is, if you type in Nordstrom in Google, you'll see this kind of right-hand rail area. So this is called the knowledge panel. It's free to have your own. So if somebody types your brand, you could have your own knowledge panel that says your name, your logo. It could have links to your website. You can also do posts on it. So you can post like upcoming products. You can link to, if you're using, so when you search like platform loafers and you see those ads, if you're using the Google Merchant Center that you're housing those ads, you can link to those from this right-hand rail. So it can be really helpful when people are searching your brand. It just gives you more real estate. And so in the next slide, I have a link to Google My Business and how to set it up. One thing you want to think about when you're setting up your Facebook page, your Google, even your Instagram, all of your social media, Twitter, if you have any listings on, God forbid, Yellow Pages or something else, you just want to make sure you're consistent. So I know that's been one of my themes I keep touting, but they're really all about the consistency. So you want to make sure your brand name, if you're using an address, you can always use like if you're just using California, if you're using a phone number, you want to make sure it's exactly the same in every single listing, because that'll give your brand more authority. Google will say, oh, they're listed in all these places. And then you want to make sure that you're linking back to your website whenever you can. So a lot of times I see people create a Facebook page and then they don't use that about section to link back to their website. So you want to make sure you're taking advantage of all the opportunities to link back. Pinterest is another example where you can link back to your site. So something to think about. And then when Google's trying to understand your brand, they're looking at your Facebook business page and they're looking at your Google My Business page. So that link up here that you can set up, but they're kind of determining those two sources to understand, like, is this your business? So if you've ever experienced a copycat, for example, a lot of times that's how they kind of rank above you, because you don't have that consistency. And so a lot of times that can kind of keep that from happening. And then you want to make sure that that same info, your name, like, so if you have a copyright, that's good. Your email address, if you're using that in many places, address, if you're using it, you don't have to, but if you are, you want to make sure it's just in every place. Same with phone number. And then this is a Google My Business account for a photographer that's local, but just you can kind of see like how it breaks down. People can ask questions. So it'll probably look more like this for you versus the Nordstrom example, because Nordstrom has a Wikipedia page, but it does give a good amount of content. So it'll like link to your reviews, it'll show a description, it'll show links to your social media accounts. So there's a lot of control that you can have over what people see. And it can be really helpful as soon as as you're developing brand awareness. And then you want to make sure that you're linking back from Google. So if you do write that article on summer trends, you want to make sure that you're linking from your Facebook page or promoting your article that links back to your website. Same way if you use LinkedIn or Pinterest or any of your social media platforms. And then trying to do that once a week is always helpful. Google sees LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook as these like super important websites with really high authority. So the more you link back to your website, the more credibility it establishes. And that's the end. I have this little checklist at the end to kind of like think through SEO more frequently, but that's kind of it. And then I know we have some questions.
Oh my goodness. I feel like I've just been hit with this like wave of amazing information. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so good. For everyone who's watching, I'm sure that you have lots of questions. I do have some questions that were pre-submitted by community members, but if anyone wants to pop their camera on and ask anything because you're here on the live, we'd love to hear your questions first. Drop them in the chat or pop your camera on. I see Rhonda, you turned your camera on. You have a question? Hi, welcome. You're just saying hi. That's okay. No problem. Okay. So do you mind, Danielle, popping back up to the top of the presentation and we'll go through each page because a couple of things you chatted about actually, and I think it might be nice if we were, let's see here. Yeah, let's go there. Okay, so this is not exactly the same, but we did have a question about domain authority, and if you'd be willing to chat about what does that mean and how important it is.
Yeah, of course. So domain authority, I talked about without talking about it exactly.
Okay.
Domain authority is Google's perception of how qualified your site is. So they're looking at how many links are going to your site, how many links are linking in between the pages, and how many links are coming from your site to external sources. So, and then they're judging the quality of each one of those links. And so they're trying, and the freshness. So they're trying to decide how qualified is your site in comparison to somebody else's. So it's a score out of 100. It's somewhat made up because Google doesn't have any sort of tool that shares. It's a lot of software algorithms where you can go check your potential score out of 100. There is benefit to having a higher value, but things like content, links, like your internal linking seems to trump that score in a lot of cases. One of the reasons I had the recommendation to like link back from your social media sites is because Google thinks that Facebook, YouTube, Google themselves, they all have really strong domain authority. So you're like creating that free link back. It tells them that you are also a high value site. There's a lot of people, and I'm sure you've all seen emails where somebody's like, I'm going to build links to your site. Usually that's trash. You should not follow that up. But link building is a really popular SEO term, and there's whole companies that's all they do. Usually Google doesn't like that, and they're pretty smart at understanding when somebody's being fake. If somebody reaches out to you that has a similar website and wants to link back to your site, if you link back to them, that can be super impactful and helpful. But kind of link farming, as they call it, where you have just tons of links, is never ideal. So domain authority is one of those 250 factors, but it's not something that's going to necessarily make or break you.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. I see the Vanity Boutique. You're asking, how often should a sitemap be submitted? Once a month. Sorry for the late question. You're not late. Everyone ask your questions now. You're not late. You're here. We're so glad you're here.
Oops, I accidentally.
That's okay. We can just go through the questions. It's all right. It's nice to see everyone's faces on here if their cameras are on.
I was just going to pull up a example. So in case anyone doesn't know what a sitemap is. So there's two types of sitemaps. You have like XML sitemaps. So Google looks at the XML sitemap, that Google Search Console link that I talked about earlier. You can submit your XML sitemap. So Shopify, Squarespace, WordPress will all build you XML sitemaps, and they look like this. So it's basically a list of all of your URLs in one place, if it would ever load. And then it's telling Google like this URL was recently refreshed. So all Google cares about in the XML sitemap is your actual URL, and then they care about the last time it was modified. They don't really care what your, daily, these two efforts don't really matter anymore. Usually if you have a plugin, it'll do it automatically for you, so you don't have to do any sort of crazy coding. You shouldn't have to, in theory, submit your sitemap once you submit it that first time to Google Search Console. Even if you don't, they should be crawling it anyway. But if you feel like your content's not ranking, or you promoted something, you made a new page, or you made a bunch of new pages and you want Google to pick it up faster, you can submit your sitemap, but you don't have to manually submit it too frequently. You don't have to manually submit it at all, to be honest.
Once you're set up, you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah, you're good. Google will keep crawling you. They are more so looking at how much traffic, how many people are going to that page versus, and they're looking at all traffic too, not just SEO traffic.
Very cool. So we have another question that was submitted before about how to how to self-track your SEO efforts. Do you recommend using specific tools? Since a lot of us are beginners at this, what would you recommend on how to kind of measure and track if it's working or not?
Definitely Google Analytics. It can look a little scary. I can pull one up really quick just so you can see. Oops, pulled up way too many tabs there. Whoops. So if you set up Google Analytics out of the box, out of the box meaning you don't have to do anything. It just will look like this. So if I just pick a random site in here. Oh, just kidding. I picked a random site that has no traffic. That won't be helpful. So normally what I look at the most, so let's say you're in Google Analytics, there's this entire right-hand rail. You can look at all these details about your audience, where they are, if they're using mobile devices. But the report I use the most is under acquisition, all traffic channels. And then you can see from all of the channels. So direct means anybody that came directly to your site, whether it be from a bookmark, maybe they typed your URL in the browser bar, maybe they came from an email. If you don't have email tracking set up, this will tell you where everybody's coming from. So you can say like, oh, 4,600 people are coming through my paid search ads, and then this many of them are buying something or downloading something. Organic search will be SEO, but this to me is like the most useful report. And then if you click on any of these default channel groupings, you can click landing page and it'll tell you exactly where they landed and if they left or if they downloaded something or if they bought something from that page. And this helps tell me like what efforts are working, which ones are not. But Google Analytics, you just got to play around in it and it'll kind of make more sense over time. But if you only looked at one report, it would be this channel one.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Alexa, this is a great question. Okay, since the listing is transferred from Trendsi to Shopify, and I can explain for Danielle if you're not sure if you're not familiar with how our platform works, the product URL is created and the product description is already there. Should we change this per product, or Trendsi already did the SEO work sort of? Okay, this is a great question, and I can kind of clarify because I don't think Danielle's logged on to Trendsi to see how it works, but we are creating listings and we don't, we name them red ruffle dress, whatever the name would be, and the listing and the product URL has that in it. So Alexa, are you concerned about so many people having the exact same URL? Danielle, what do you think of that? Should our users be tweaking the listings as they import them?
Yes. So the product URL could be the same. You don't necessarily have to change it. So is the product URL itself living on Trendsi, or does it live on the person's like domain?
Yeah, on their own domain. We transfer all the listings they import right into their Shopify, fully integrated to Shopify. So we've done all the work to create listings for them. They surface on the Shopify, pictures, descriptions, measurements, the link, everything. It's in their personal website.
Okay. I would recommend changing at least the product description in that case so that it's unique to your page.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just reading.
Yeah. That's okay.
So you should definitely change it. So if you think about, if Google sees the same page in theory, like let's say they've seen the same exact product listing on like 80 different domains, they don't necessarily understand the difference. So if you give your own like paraphrasing of that product description, it can actually help you rank better. And then depending on the title, you could change that, tweak that as well. So if it's something super specific to what the product is, like let's say your example was like red ruffle shirt, if you want to give that like a fancy name on top of that, like the, Solaris red ruffle shirt or something like that, that can also help just give it more. You don't have to change URL, but the title and the description, like just giving it more of a unique tone can help you rank a little bit higher and get more visibility. Like, I'm not sure exactly what the product description looks like, but sometimes if you repeat the name too, that can help.
Oh, very cool. Okay. Yeah, that's great. This kind of links together to one of the pre-submitted questions. So one of our users was asking, since, many of our sellers import the same listing, same photos, same everything, she was considering going through and adding a ton of like ALT, the alt image text inside of the images. Do you feel like this is something that also would be helping? I know you briefly touched on it in your presentation.
Yes. So if you're stack ranking factors of SEO, alt text and image file name are like pretty close to the bottom, but because this industry is so like, I'll just show you an example. So we were searching like chunky platform loafer, like you got your ads up here, and then immediately it shows you images. If you have that alt text and you have that image file name that both have that keyword in it, you're way more likely to rank here. So then somebody's going to click here, and this is organic. So this is SEO view. So yes.
Very cool. I'm reading the rest of her question to see if we answered it. She'd love to know the best ways to find the keywords that she should be using to benefit a new store, and some inexpensive tools to find them.
So
Okay.
this tool I love. It's called searchvolume.io. If you are in the market to buy a tool, SEMrush is, you could also just like use it for a little bit. They have a free trial. This one is free, but it'll like cap you, I think, at 100 keywords a day. So you can keep coming back and using it whenever you want. And this lets you put in whatever you want, but it won't give you any ideas. So there's a tool called SEMrush that will let you, I might get mad at me. Nope. So like, let's say I put in chunky loafer, it'll spit back out and tell me everything related to that. So I can see like, oh, people are searching women. Oh, they're searching for a heel. I can see exactly how many searches there are. I can see who's ranking in the top positions for those terms. And then I can also kind of get a sense of how much traffic that page is getting. So this Nordstrom page gets 7,400 visits a month. So they would be a good one to look at to see what to do. So this tool can be super helpful. I think it's, I want to say it's $100 a month. But if you only used it, you did 1 month and then you didn't use it and you turned it off, you can kind of turn it on and off. I guess, okay, now it's 120. They have raised their pricing with inflation.
But still very cool. I would never have known about this.
Another cool aspect of this tool is you could, like, let's say you have a competitor that you really want to know how they're performing. You can look under their organic research tab, and then we can go look at their pages and we can say, oh wow, they have a great page on, these are all so boring, cocktail dresses, yeah. Like maybe something like wedding guest dresses. Okay, we'll call that unique, but it's not really. But you can get a sense for like, okay, they've used this category topic and they're getting 84,000 visits. So maybe that's something like jumpsuits and rompers. That's more interesting, maybe 82,000 visits a month. So it can kind of like identify category names or even product names that you might want to create to try and get more traffic that are generating traffic for them.
Very cool. Okay, follow-up question. With one of our users, a lot of our Trendsi sellers are newer business owners or social sellers who, made most of their, look, I love that you're adding your tools in there. Like maybe most of us built our own websites, kind of homemade, right? So she's asking if my website is not the most mobile friendly yet, because she's still learning and growing and building, is that going to hurt her as far as SEO goes?
Potentially it's limiting you because, so a great way, and I can put this tool in here too, a great way to test. So the Google Search Console the Google Search Console tool has a tool in there that'll let you kind of enter a URL. I'm going to use Amazon. But so this website is Google's tool. So it's free to use. You can put any URL you want in here and it'll tell you if it thinks your website is mobile friendly or not. And so it'll take a hot minute to load. I can put this in I'll just stick it down here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can also put it in the chat. It might take a minute to load it, but it'll tell you your score out of 100. So this 59 is not terrible. So you might actually not be as not mobile friendly as you think. But it'll tell you ways, this is getting pretty technical, but it'll tell you ways to kind of fix the problem, or it'll at least tell you what it is. Like a lot of times what the problem is that the images are too big. I would say 85% of the time people have not sized their images appropriately. And that is what's causing the page to be really slow for mobile. So just thinking about resizing, normally rule of thumb is you want to use a JPEG instead of a PNG, and then you want it to be under 150 kilobytes. So it's not taking too long to load. A lot of people will put these beautiful retina images, but you're looking at it on a tiny phone, it'll be okay.
Yeah, it's true. Very cool. That's all the questions that I had submitted ahead of time. Did anyone else who's here on the live want to ask any questions while we have Danielle here with us? And if not, it's no problem. This was so good, Danielle. I don't think you understand how good. I mean, I'm sure you understand. I don't know if you can realize how much value you just brought to us. And we're really, really grateful. This was such a great session. I don't see any further questions. Hannah Wolf says it was so amazing. And it was. This is so good. For anyone who's on here, and if you're watching the replay, we can definitely get you, if you've RSVP'd to the summer school sessions through the Eventbrite link, we are sending any of the speakers who are willing to share their deck afterwards, which Danielle said she is. We can send the deck and the recording links out via email to anyone who's RSVP'd. Oh, yeah, it's true. Hannah says, come back and teach us more once we grasp this part. We'd love to have you back anytime. This was so lovely. Oh, thank you so much, you guys. Everyone have a wonderful Friday and a good weekend. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.